Hey everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to episode 199 of the I Suck at Jiu Jitsu show. So today you're not hearing any background music for our intro. You didn't hear the little man, I can make that noise with my mouth. I didn't realize that. Shoot. The spray paint sound. No, nothing. And that is because today's episode, probably tomorrow's or next Thursday's episode, and then possibly even the Thursday after that's episode, we'll see. That's when the light starts to come through again. These episodes are going to be made without any editing. The studio is basically finished. There's a few little sound things to hang, but the studio is basically finished. And as I am in the middle of finishing the studio, I'm rendering this video, meaning I'm taking a video that I edited, an episode that I edited, and my computer's a little older, so it takes me, for an hour episode, it'll take like 20 minutes to render, which is a decent, it's not a video editing level of computer, to be honest, for what I'm rendering, what I'm editing. But anyway, that day it was taking like an hour and 20 minutes, and it was doing some weird stuff, and it wasn't promising. And as we got deeper and deeper, and I found out more and more, it turns out that my computer's not going to make it. And it turned from an hour and 20 to render an episode to, this is why I think it's the Jake Watson episode has no video, is because I'm in the middle of editing, and then I was like, wait, I can't edit it. I need to just release this as a picture and sound so you guys can hear it. But anyway, my computer is dead. So while I'm in the process of course, competing this weekend at Worlds, of course, out of town, doing a seminar next weekend, a lot of stuff to do in between. The studio is getting finished, all these other things. My wife and I just found out the gender of our baby. Do you guys want me to tell you what that is? I'll tell you that on episode 200. We'll keep that. Have I told you that already? No, I don't think so. Yeah, I'll tell you guys that on episode 200. Anyway, this is a really strong intro right now. But the truth is, this episode doesn't have an intro because I have no way to transition from the intro to the episode. Let's get into the idea of this episode. I didn't finish my thought. Computer's dead. It's gone. Have too much stuff. It's going to be a couple weeks till it's up again. And until then, I cannot edit interviews. But I can still release solo episodes. And so we'll still do Thursday solo episodes forever. And we will eventually, you remember a few months ago, I told you guys, I could just say we're going to be doing these Tuesday episodes every single Tuesday, these interviews. But then I had this thought of like, man, maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I shouldn't tell you guys. Maybe I shouldn't commit to hitting it because the studio wasn't finished. And I'm so glad that I didn't commit to, I'm going to knock out an episode every single Tuesday. Just watch me. But we will be back in a few weeks with those Tuesday episodes. And once we come back with those interviews, they will be permanent. It will be every Thursday. You will hear a solo episode with your old pal, Josh McKinney. And then every Tuesday, you will hear an interview with your old pal, Josh McKinney, and one of his old pals, or maybe a new pal. And so, be on the lookout for that kind of stuff. If there's a subplot to this episode, it's just being able to go with the flow. Obviously, this is not what I intended for episode 199 or episode 200 for that matter. I had a different intention, but we're just going to do it the way we can. And I think it's going to turn out really well. I really like how I don't like what happened. This was actually supposed to be a reposted episode today, or 199 was supposed to. And so I had no plan for this episode, but I kind of came up with a plan when my computer died. And so the concept for episode 200 is going to be 1,263 days later. Do I still suck at jiu-jitsu? And the idea of it is going to be, what big lessons did I learn and how much have I changed in the time that I have done jiu-jitsu. And so I thought something that would be really fun to do right before that, and we can make this a 2-part episode, is this first part is, yes, it is 1,263 days later. Do I still suck at jiu-jitsu? Yes, it is still the same idea, but it's more of me kind of going through a quick glossary of some of my favorite episodes, some episodes that affected me a lot, or some episodes that I said things that I have re-listened to since and said, oh, this was good, or I think about it differently now. And it's just kind of a way I thought, if you were a new listener and you found the ISAJJ Jiu-Jitsu show, you could go to episode 199, you can listen and say, okay, these are some of the places that I want to start in listening to this show. There's so much free content that's just out there forever on the ISAJJ Jiu-Jitsu show. And so as long as the app that you're using to listen to the show, as long as you're doing that, as long as that app doesn't just keep it limited to like 50 or 100 episodes that it keeps, this episode will always be very valuable. You'll always be able to look back on the first 200 and say, okay, first 4 years of the show, how is it going? 3 years. 3 years of the show? 4 years. 4-ish years. You guys know. About 4 years of the show. What were the things that were big? What were the things that Josh needs me to know right now? And so that is what this episode is. We are already into the episode. Let's continue to get into this episode. So I just wanted to go through some different episode numbers. I'm not going to link any episodes in the description because I literally have 40 episodes to tell you guys about, and I didn't want to link all of those. They all have episode numbers. And the ones that don't, maybe there's some that's like, I'll say the number is, I think there's some that are like 30. Okay, here we go. There's one that's 49.5 that I'll talk about. And that's just because it's when I used to do Suckless Saturdays, and it didn't have an episode number, but it's tucked between episodes 49 and 50. And so everything will be very clear on how you could find these episodes and how you could hear me basically talk for an hour on the idea that I'm just going to touch on or just going to tell you about for a second. So basically, this is just descriptions of episodes. Maybe this is going to fall flat. Maybe this sucks. Maybe I'll find some as I'm going through this. Maybe I'll find some cool lessons or cool things. But let's get into it. So the first episode that I ever put out, keep in mind, I was unable to say jiu-jitsu until like episode 50 on the ISAJJ Jiu-Jitsu show. I would call it jiu-jitsu. So just be aware of that. Obviously, it changes. Obviously, I learned how to do it. Jake Watson, just a few episodes ago, actually congratulated me on learning to properly pronounce the art that I have dedicated my life to. And so that was very nice of him. That was very nice of him to remember and congratulate me on it. But anyway, I start the show. I'll tell you guys about kind of why I started, what the motivation was in next week's episode when we actually dig into whether or not I still suck at jiu-jitsu. And spoiler alert, I probably do. So we'll go into episode 1 and episode 92. I know those are weird to throw together, but they are about the exact same thing. They are about what I call the end goal method of training. And what's significant to me about episode 1 is, one, it's the first episode, of course. It's me on my phone, talking into my phone microphone in my bedroom, because the bed was absorbing enough sound. That was the only place in my house that wasn't too echoey. And it's 15 minutes, and it's me with no real intention, not beginning with the end in mind, none of that other stuff that I ever do. I'm just winging this. I'm just feeling out, okay, somebody suggested that I should do a podcast. I have a funny name that would work for a podcast. Why don't I start it tonight? And that was episode 1. And so, quick takeaway. If you wanted to start a podcast, I know I waited till I was a black belt to do any type of consistent content creation, but there are blue belts that make livings now doing jiu-jitsu and recording it in ways and explaining it in ways and making it enjoyable to watch in ways. And they're able to do that because they started creating content and they kept doing it consistently. And this was my start. I don't pay for my life with my podcast. If anything, I am still in the hole a bunch of money on this podcast and will be in the hole even more when I buy this new computer that I have to buy. If you guys have any recommendations for a good video editing computer, I'm really leaning towards the Mac Studio. I've never really been an Apple product guy, but I don't know. Maybe I am now. Maybe I'm an Apple products guy. Oh yeah, big other thing is probably any commercial that I talk about in any of these episodes is probably long gone. And so don't be like listening to episode 5 and be like, oh my gosh, Josh is talking about this product that doesn't exist anymore that he's giving away and it's not there. Yeah, that I can't help that. I'm sorry. It's just how it is. Anyway, so then we'll go past the simplest way to progress at jiu-jitsu, where we really look at the first and what we stay on forever. Training method is really what this podcast has produced that's valuable, in my opinion, or shared that's really valuable. There's a lot of mindset stuff. There's a lot of other stuff. But I do feel like you could probably do what I did and get all that mindset stuff and get all those other things from other podcasts. But I do feel like if there was one thing that the ISAJJ Jiu-Jitsu show in the last 200 episodes has done differently, it is the excessive focus on training method. And we're going to touch on that again, but that training method journey really starts episode 1. And then I end up redoing that episode on episode 92, just so I can explain the end goal method. Actually, spoiler alert, at the very end of this episode, I'm going to tell you about my 2 favorite solo episodes where I redo the idea of the end goal method a third time. It's a little shorter, but it's probably the most clear and concise. And I'll tell you guys that at the end of the episode. Next episodes to look out for, any of the ones with Steve McKinney, my dad, Steve McKinney, but I thought 2 and 14 are very, very, very good to jump on it, because both are about longevity. Both are about being able to lift weights and train forever. And we're going to come back to you guys in the episode early 200s with a lot of focus on building yourself as an athlete, learning how to do that, and not as a steroid athlete. If there is one thing that I have stayed true to on this show, it is that even though I'm still trying to be an adult jiu-jitsu athlete, an adult black belt athlete, the temptation, the thought of steroid use has really never even crossed my mind. And it's because I've watched my dad focus on longevity and seen the importance of that. But also, my dad is not just knowledgeable when it comes to longevity. He is knowledgeable when it comes to training athletes and natural athletes at that. And so we have some new stuff. Justin Kitchler and I, a few episodes ago, hinted at it. We have some new stuff when it comes to, it's actually not new. It's actually really old stuff. But it follows the same concept of the show. We're going to take the physicality part of jiu-jitsu and just try to make it simpler and understandable for you, whether that means you're trying to be an athlete, whether you're trying to lose weight, whatever you're trying to do in the jiu-jitsu space physically. We're going to come back in those 200 episodes, those early 200s, and really give you some chances and really show you guys what we have found since we've been more focused on jiu-jitsu athletes, more focused on jiu-jitsu longevity, and just more focused in general. And so we'll get into those, and you guys want to be on the lookout for those. But I thought it would be nice, since we are doing those, is to look at 2 and 14 with Steve McKinney, because we're going to talk longevity. Also, somebody that's going to be on the podcast all the time, and you can meet him his first time on episode 7, and then he's kind of peppered throughout, is my coach, Kyle Watson. The other thing, and this is kind of why I put these two together, my dad and Kyle. Obviously, they were my first 2 interviews too, so that made it easy to put them together. But I thought I could talk about these 2 talking points. The first one was longevity. The idea of taking steroids has not tempted me. The second one was like, there were really only two goals, two caveats I put on my jiu-jitsu when I was starting out, when I was really trying to be an athlete, and I was seeing how everybody else was handling being an athlete, because I was a blue belt once, I was a purple belt once. There was a time that jiu-jitsu competition was brand new to me, and I didn't understand it, and I didn't understand training method. I didn't understand the value that my coach had. And I think that there are times that everybody does, because you just learn from one perspective, and then you look around and you go, hey, maybe this guy knows, or maybe these guys are winning. Maybe I should move there. And I saw a lot of friends do that, and some of them it worked out for, some of them it didn't. That's life, right? But for me specifically, this may not be the same for you. For me specifically, the coach that I started with day one is the coach that I will have forever. And those two things, no steroid use and staying on my team, were the only two things that I actually cared about more than going and winning a very big title. I said, these two things I will value more in the jiu-jitsu space. And then it can be about winning after that. But those two things are what mattered. And so that's why I wanted to make sure to share those episodes. And those episodes are fun for me, man. I when I re-listen to episodes like that are that long ago, conversations of me and Watson from 4 years ago, where he's talking about telling his son Reed when they're watching Star Wars and they cut open the tauntaun and stick Luke inside so he doesn't die. The son Reed's like, hey, why are they doing that? And Kyle says, oh, it's so he can stay warm. And Reed goes, well, is it warm in there? And Kyle says, oh, it's lukewarm. And so yeah, you can get introduced to Kyle Watson and his dad jokes, and they're going to be back again. They were just back a few episodes ago with he and Junior. You guys should check that one out. I actually didn't write down that number. Total noob move. Let's keep moving along. Episode 15. This is still that idea of training method. Original idea of the show. We continue with it. I think that this is a big precursor to some of the training methods, some of the designated winner stuff that we come up with, but it's not the biggest one. But I think it's worth listening to. For me, maybe it's not even worth listening to episode 15, but for me, episode 15, I just start to understand podcasting a little bit. I start to understand doing a solo cast, how to ramble, how to rant, all that stuff. Now let's look at 4 episodes that I will highlight for you, that they are episode 17, episode 30.5, which is, remember, between episode 30 and 31, obviously, episode 43, and episode 64. So every single one of these episodes, in some form or another, is about losing and learning how to accept losing and learning how to get better from losing. And so the first one, though, I really wanted to make sure to highlight is episode 17, because enough time has passed, I can actually tell you what's going on there. I post this episode on the podcast. I had just lost a match that probably, I mean, not even probably, that I was at this tournament, at the event, every single person was saying, dude, I think that they might have messed up the score in that match. And I made sure the next day to release an episode, and I made sure to specify, made sure that people were aware that it had nothing to do with that call. And I didn't even reference the call. And so I think that is number 17. I think that's a really good, and I'm not trying to say that I'm this great example for people. I am saying, though, that I have 4 episodes all around the same time, all about losing in jiu-jitsu competition and trying to grow from it while I am an adult competitor. What do you think during that time is happening to me? An exceptional amount. I am losing. I am losing in and out. I'm losing every single week, it feels like. And that doesn't mean I'm not winning matches, but I'm not winning tournaments. I'm not near where I'm trying to get to, where I hope to get to. And I think that those episodes, now that I'm 3 years removed from them, 2 years removed from them, and now that I actually can win a match every now and then, now I can actually win tournaments, and now that I'm actually, getting a lot better as a competitor, I can look back on those and go, oh, that really was. I kept a really positive attitude. I moved on. I focused on what I could control. I did all those other things. But oof, that's a hard time, man. It's a hard time to be a black belt 12 years in. And your body to just be broken because you were too proud to do steroids, and you just aren't able to compete. It's really tough to do that. And so I just think that for people that are going through losing, whether you're losing in the gym, whether you're losing in tournaments, whether it's big events, it is a struggle, and it's this struggle that you are going to deal with in jiu-jitsu forever. I deal with it still. And I've gotten a lot better. I've gotten pretty darn good. There aren't many people that I roll with that threaten me too much anymore. Even in competition, they're becoming less and less guys that I will lock with and go, oh, whoa, I feel significantly better than this guy. A lot of people that I'm competing with anymore, I'm getting to do that. But listen to those episodes, because it's been a few months that I've been feeling really good at jiu-jitsu. It's been maybe a year at the most. I lost a lot of black belt to get here, and probably will continue to. Nah, probably not. I think I'm done losing, if I'm being honest with you guys. I think I'm not going to do that anymore. But if I did, I would re-listen to episode 17, 30.5, 43, and 64 to just talk to you guys about losing. Next episode, a big interview, somebody I didn't know well, Huron Gracie. I don't need to sell this one to you. It's Huron Gracie, dude. It actually is. I always say that there are solo episodes that are the most listened to episodes, but I want to say that Huron episode, I don't really check YouTube analytics. I just kind of throw my podcast on YouTube. I don't pay much attention to it. During these next couple episodes in the 200s, now that the studio's finished, the YouTube channel is actually going to be cool, and it's not just going to be the podcast. But it was like the first thing I ever threw on the podcast because I knew it was such a good interview. And I had all these questions, but I'm dealing with Huron Gracie and just didn't realize Huron felt like talking about being present. So we talked about being present, and it was amazing. It was such a good conversation, but I think that episode might have gotten a lot more listens on YouTube. So it technically could be my most listened to episode. I don't know though. But you guys would really like that one. Some of the mindset stuff that JT Torres talks about, excellent stuff. Really cool guy too. I actually did some like virtual private lessons with him after that. Just really helped me understand how real adult black belt world champion level athletes think, and how they think about themselves, how they look at themselves, how they look at the tournament, and how they look at competition. So that was really great. Episode 39 with Kenny Florian. I tell you guys this, I've told you guys this before, it's my favorite interview. But it's not my favorite interview even for the content. I will tell you next week why it's my favorite interview. But I re-listened to the interview because I had the intention of that episode being today. That was this episode I was going to repost because I thought it was so significant. There are, I'm using the word precursors now like we used for designated winner, but there are so many precursors to so many different big thoughts that we talk about on the show. Kind of look at the three lenses. I think a big idea of that kind of came from Kenny. It's definitely different than how he looks at, the three lenses of MMA, or his three lenses of MMA. That's not what he called it, but those three perspectives of fighters, of what makes a fighter. And, really that idea in jiu-jitsu when it comes to training method, using the three lenses. If you don't know, the athlete, the scientist, or the artist. and taking those training methods that those people do and saying, hey, which one do you gravitate towards? Which one of these training methods feels the best to you? Do you enjoy the most? Which training method do you notice makes you better at jiu-jitsu? And so, and then with that, there's also some breakdowns on training method. There's breakdowns on all kinds of jiu-jitsu terminology. And that book is absolutely free, simplifyingjujitsu.com/3. Keep in mind, there are no cuts in this episode. So that's, I guess, my commercial. But anyway, that episode 39 with Kenny Florian, he just really is, he's a cool dude, man. It's just the way that I am able to talk to him in that. And you can compare it to my other interviews before. They weren't as good. A lot of them after weren't as good. But that one, the conversation is really good. And it's like the questions are really good. And he even asked me he even said some really positive things to me after. I'll tell you guys that about that next week. But just the precursors in this episode are kind of crazy. If you go through it, I definitely think if you were going to listen to one old interview, that would be the one I would listen to. Now let's talk mindset, and we'll talk more competition mindset. I said JT Torres, but what's funny to me is, and this is not saying anything negative towards JT, obviously. This is more towards me understanding that conversations with my friends and people I know very well, they seem to be the best thing for the podcast. When I'm starting to realize this at this point, and this point is like episode 66 and 80 with Eric Hebner. Eric's going to come back on the show. I'm sure that we're going to have some new stuff with him. We're going to really start creating content with all my guys that you guys are begging to hear to come back. We're going to start doing it, I promise. But if you guys have not heard 66 and 80, where I'm talking to Eric's my wrestling coach. So if I'm ever referencing my wrestling coach in the episodes, that's who I'm talking about. But he's also one of my black belts. I'm his jiu-jitsu coach. And so Eric and I, just a little backstory on him. When I first started out and I was a purple belt, and there are multiple gyms with black belts all around us and high-level coaches, and Eric was kind of jumping around and he was training. He had lost his coach. His coach wasn't training as much anymore, and so he's looking for a place to train. And he comes to Head Nod HQ, and I'm a purple belt, and he's a purple belt, I think. I mean, maybe he's late blue belt, but I think he just got his purple belt. And he's like showing up to a lot of my 6 a.m.s, and he's showing up to a lot of my 6 p.m.s. As I know, he's bouncing around and trying to find somewhere to train. And then one day I'm like, Eric, you've been here a lot. And he says, oh yeah. He says, I'm in, dude. I want to train here. And I was shook. It's like, why? Eric, it's me and it's a bunch of white belts. I even think at that time it wasn't even me and Huff and a bunch of white belts. I think Huff had a different job at that time and wasn't able to train. Justin Huff, who also, again, me interviewing my friends, those episodes that I didn't realize at the time, but they're so much better, right? And I'm starting to realize this because we can just get so much deeper on stuff, and I can know the stuff that they have, the knowledge that they have that I haven't even like gotten into, right? But anyway, back to Eric. He tells me, yeah, I'm going to train here. And I'm like, Eric, why would you want to train here, dude? And he goes, I think you have the best jiu-jitsu. And that belief in me as a purple belt from a guy who had been on the mat, he had seen a lot of grappling. He wrestled his whole life. This dude has thousands of wrestling matches, of matches, 1,000+ matches, just an unbelievable amount of grappling experience. And he told me that. He said, hey, in this art I'm trying to get good at, I want to stay here. I like you. That was so significant to me. That was such a huge thing to me. But also, those episodes on mindset, he's helped me so much with my mindset. He's helped me so much with my wrestling, of course. But we don't really talk as much about wrestling. Now I really think that he's conceptualized a lot of ideas about his wrestling. We could probably do a BGM mental model style episode where we talk about how to wrestle with Eric, or even do one with Eric and then eventually one with Kyle, or one with both. Yeah, those would be awesome. Anyway, next episode, probably one of the most overlooked episodes, and it's probably not for everybody, but if you are a competitor, listen to episode 70. If you are a competitor, listen to episode 70 on breath work with Miles Lucas. Miles is a black belt, but he's also a Wim Hof certified instructor, and he throws some stuff out there about how breath work can help your competition anxiety. It absolutely can. And I'm not saying this just from personal experience. I'm saying this like with every single one of my athletes does this now. Every single one of my athletes has been around for a while does this now. Maybe my newer guys don't do this as much, but all of the guys that have trained for a while and compete a lot see the value in breath work because we've experimented. We've done it without, we've done it with, we've done it without, we've done it with. And when you're getting a lot of reps in tournaments, you're really able to say, oh, this is actually helping or this isn't. And one of the only things that we all do besides a hard warm-up is Wim Hof breathing. I personally do 3 sets of 30 breaths. They start slow, and then as I get past 5, I go and I turn it up 5 more, and then maybe by the time we're at 20, I'm breathing very quickly, deep but quickly, and then I hit to 30, my last 5 breaths, maybe I'll slow down. You'll start to get the face tingles, you'll start to get nervous. You control your breath again, maybe even a breath hold for 20, 30 seconds, maybe even a minute. You'll notice you can do because you have so much oxygen. Your oxygen levels are so high at that point. But what happens is you are forcing yourself to hyperventilate, which is an anxiety attack, or which happens a lot in an anxiety attack, right? It's not an anxiety attack, but a lot of times that is the physical response when people are having an anxiety attack, is they start to hyperventilate. I'm dying, I can't breathe. When you force yourself to do that, and keep in mind, this is not medical advice in any way. This is just for entertainment purposes. This is a podcast. Don't sue me. But for me, when I have done this and done this physical response of breath work, and it's put me into that anxiety place that I'm in, right? It puts a ton of pressure on me, because I am in that physical response that if I was having an anxiety attack, I would be there too. I'm doing the physical part. Those 3 sets, and maybe I'll do 2 minutes in between sets at the most, and I do these completely laying down, generally headphones in, generally with not hard music playing. The amount of anxiety you will experience during the breath work is crazy. You're going to do 90 breaths total, but you will experience anxiety. And you can practice this at home and visualize that you're at a tournament. And I promise you will it will feel bizarre. You'll see colors sometimes. It's weird, but it helps with competition anxiety. You will stand up eventually, 5 minutes. I usually do this about an hour and a half out. But that episode 70, absolutely should listen to it. It is what put me where I'm at with breathwork now. And I'm not a breathwork everyday guy. I'm not going to lie to you guys and tell you like, oh yeah, I'm doing breathwork. But when it comes for competition and also deep inflation of the ribs and of the lungs and like expanding your ribs and then moving around, or even, expanding your lungs, expanding your rib cage, and doing hangs, like dead hangs on a pull-up bar, or even something that holds your wrist so you can dead hang on a pull-up bar, will help with so many rib injuries. Again, this is just my experience, and this is not medical advice, but has helped me with my rib injuries. Most rib injuries in jiu-jitsu that I have seen and heard of that were diagnosed by doctors who know so much more than jiu-jitsu athletes, who never seem to be able to to diagnose or help anyone with this problem is, those rib injuries I really think are caused from tightness in your ribs, usually from your lats. You can roll out your lats. Think about how strong your lats are because of jiu-jitsu. All you do is hug and keep your elbows tight if you're doing jiu-jitsu right. That's not, you got to loosen up your lats, man. You got to stretch. You got to raise your hands above your head for a couple minutes a day. And that will stretch out your ribs. And at least for me, it really helped me. And again, this is not medical advice, as you guys know. Anyway, let's go to episode 49.5. This was called The Biggest Problem Facing BJJ. When I looked back and I was going through every episode, I go, what did I consider? What was that? What did I call the biggest problem facing BJJ? It's only a 10-minute episode. It's a Suck Less Saturday episode when I was doing those. It is about how everyone wants to innovate on techniques, and nobody is innovating on training methods. And that is what episode 49.5 is. And the reason I slowed it down, if you're a brand new listener to the show and you're like, okay, well, why is that significant? Is because if there is one thing that has actually been cool that has come out of the I Suck at Jiu Jitsu show, and I'm very confident that it has come out of the I Suck at Jiu Jitsu show, not out of my gym, not out of all these other places, because I never would have formulated it as an idea and realized the significance in the value of just naming something if it wasn't for the I Suck at Jiu Jitsu show. The end goal method was not the end goal method until I started the show and it needed a name. I used to tell people that was the first 6 weeks to 6 months. You can ask any person I know, what would I tell them when they first started jiu-jitsu? Master one thing. Because if you can master one thing, then eventually you can take what you did to master that one thing, and start to master other things. Also, most people don't even have one move that they're good at. They just try to generally learn everything and then eventually hope they get good. But if you had one thing that you're good at, you at least have a place to go. You have an end goal, right? And that's where that name end goal method came from. And on episode 49.5, The Biggest Problem Facing Jiu-Jitsu, we talk about how training method is this hole in the jiu-jitsu space where people don't have an understanding. And designated winner has come out of the show since then. And so it was literally 2 years later, designated winner. I hadn't even done a round of designated winner or that I knew of at that time. And so that's really cool to me that is what happened. Where are we at? Okay, 94. If you're dealing with jiu-jitsu burnout, really short episode to just 3 steps to beat jiu-jitsu burnout. I really think it's helpful. These next 3 episodes, 111. Wait. Oh, no. Episode 98 is actually my first episode about strategy, and it got a lot of response. And to be honest, it was a complete throwaway. I was working really hard to get to episode 100 and have it be really good. I didn't love how episode 50 had turned out, and I was like, I want 100 to be good, and I want it to be John Thomas. And if you know John Thomas, it took me 5 months to schedule the episode with John Thomas. John was supposed to be like episode 30 of the show, and he was episode 100. But I got him on, and man, he delivered. And we talked training method, and we talked what people should be doing better. And so definitely listen to that episode 100 with John Thomas. But 2 episodes before, I had this throwaway, and it was about strategizing in a round. And so many people start to message me about it and say, I've never thought of jiu-jitsu in that way. And I was like, wait a second, you haven't? Like, I think of jiu-jitsu exclusively in that way. And I'm always thinking strategy. And like the guys that are good that I'm around, they're always thinking strategy. What's the easiest way? Okay, yeah, coach, what should I do? Should I do what guard should I play? Who cares? You should get on top. That is what you should do. You should be up 2 points on top. Whatever sweep lets you do that, that's how you do it. That's strategy, right? Because up 2 on top, what are they going to do to you, man? Nothing. Nothing. You're on top. Just stay on top. You're winning. Now they have to run after you. And that's where your guard pass comes from. That's where your mount comes from. That's where your pressure comes from, is that he has to open up now because you did your job well. That's strategy. I'm always thinking that way in jiu-jitsu, but it seemed like in episode 98, there was a hole. People aren't thinking that way. And so then we dedicate episodes 111, 12, and 13 to strategies. And we look at the idea of the blitz and the pace. And I now look back and go, I would have, if I redid those, I would combine those into one shorter episode. But I was still newer to deep dive solo episodes about things that I was just trying to break down that were in my own head. And, you can literally hear me in that episode. I'm trying to think through what I'm talking about. And so, or all three of those episodes. But if you're just going to listen to one about the strategy, people always tell me episode 111, the blitzing episode, is their favorite episode. That is the most popular solo episode in a sense of like people that have listened to it. It didn't have a super catchy title, but it did. So enough people listened to it. And the people that did go, I got so much value out of this. If you're listening to a solo, blitzing might be the 111, the most offensive strategy in jiu-jitsu. That was also when I start to learn good naming of the show. Another interview I want to highlight with you guys, two interviews, episode 68 and 108 with Chris Paynes. So for me, on the show, I really do try to, and just with any type of content creation, I try to not be braggy about jiu-jitsu and be like, oh yeah, I'm so good at jiu-jitsu. One, because I see so many guys do that on social media and do that with content creation. And I watch and I know for a fact, like, I would not only beat this guy, but I would do it so easily that it would, like, people would be upset. This is, what I mean? And people do that so much. And so I don't want to do that. I don't talk about my own jiu-jitsu ability very much. Obviously, when I compete, I'll always tell you guys about how I did. And then you guys know the jiu-jitsu ability of people that I'm beating and people that I'm fighting. And you go, whoa, maybe Josh is actually kind of good at jiu-jitsu. But I'm going to tell you guys a hidden secret of the show. And I'm going to deny this next week. I'll lie about it. But if you listen to 42 episodes into this unedited episode, I will give you this secret. I'm actually pretty darn good at jiu-jitsu, in a sense that, like, I can't, I'm trying to not sound silly when I say this, but I don't get scored on very often. And very often meaning maybe I'll get scored on once every 3 months. And I have very good training partners. And I don't get to train with them as consistently as I can. But I'm also meaning, like, in a sense of competition, I'm fighting really tough guys in competition. I'm really good at jiu-jitsu. And the only reason I'm telling you this is because of this next statement. And that is because there are certain people I've gotten to train with because of the show. And I've gotten to experience their jiu-jitsu. And I just, I thought this would be a fun little highlight because I wanted to highlight the episodes I've done with this guy because they greatly affected how good the show is. I really think. I think that seeing how Chris Paynes thinks of jiu-jitsu in episode 68 and 108. So in 68, I'll give you the backstory to these in a second, but just seeing how he thinks conceptually of jiu-jitsu, it was so freeing to me. And I know it was to him too. We both talked about it, that we both were two random guys that had all these thoughts, and a lot of the thoughts were pretty similar, and even a lot of the terms that we were using was similar, which is crazy considering we live on two sides of the world, right? But we started jiu-jitsu at the same time. We both had similar stories of being coaches pretty early and kind of being in charge of a group of guys training pretty early and having to navigate that. But then we both, I think, had a natural ability to do jiu-jitsu and then deconstruct that natural ability and say, man, I can beat guys, but I need to teach. I need to share how I'm winning these rounds. And the best way that we both found to do this is to go, it's not as much about the movement that my one arm is doing. It's more about the idea that my one arm is accomplishing. It's more about the understanding that I have. It's more about what I'm thinking about in these positions. And Chris helped me get there so much. But what I wanted to say is what's really funny when I re-listen to these. It's like episode 68. I'm a little standoffish in the beginning, and so is Chris. We don't know each other, and we're both black belts. And Chris and I have different opinions on certain parts of jiu-jitsu still. But like at that time, we don't know each other, and I'm very much conceptualizing a lot of jiu-jitsu, but I have not been around a conceptual teacher that I've been able to tolerate up until this point. Every conceptual teacher that I'd learned from up until that point, they tried to make it so simple that it felt like it wasn't doable, what they were talking about. Or it was just like, they were like, oh, just do this. And anytime people say that, they're not giving you another angle to understand it. It's usually just because they don't understand it. They know that it works, but they don't understand it. And so, I can teach you all these different, a perfect example, Chris Payne's being a Preet Mickelson black belt. I could teach you grilled chicken and show you the postures of grilled chicken and how well it helps you retain guard, and show you how if you keep guys off your upper thigh, how much it'll help you retain guard, right? There's more understanding if you keep guys off your upper thigh. But then I start to explain, look, this is why that matters, is if guy gets inside that space and stays there, you're probably going to lose. Your ability to not be flat is greatly compromised. And if you are flat, you will lose eventually. And so if you're flat and you're taking somebody's pressure, you're going to die eventually. You're going to get tired. And that is more of the conceptual approach. That is why the grilled chicken matters, like that style of guard retention matters, is because you're protecting that inside space between your armpit and your knee, between your armpit and your hip, whatever you want to call that space, your hip space, your armpit space. I do the big joint thing I talk about a lot, all these different ways to look at it. But it's that understanding of guard retention that would allow me to, if you and I were conversating, to give you other examples so you could learn it. And you could say, oh, guard retention, this is a huge piece of jiu-jitsu. Why is it never explained to me simply? And usually it's just because we don't understand it simple enough, right? We're trying to, though. And so seeing that like, oh, we're professors. That's what that means. That makes sense. Because the whole professor thing, if you call me professor, I'm going to laugh, right? And you're like, dude, come on. Who are you talking to? But think about the term. What do professors usually do? Well, they usually teach, but they usually research too. That's what these big schools do, is they get funding for research. And that's what guys like, when I first meet Chris, that's what he's been doing. But that's also what I've been doing, and I hadn't even realized it yet. That first episode, I'm basically like, this stuff that he's telling me is good. I can tell. I know jiu-jitsu well enough to know what he's explaining. Yeah, we explain it differently. We talk about it differently, but we have a lot of similar opinions. And you can actually hear us in episode 68 becoming really good friends. But until episode 108, we're not actually really good friends because we hadn't rolled. And this is what proved it to me, is like I told you guys, I'm really good. Guys, do not score on me. I swear to you, even black belts, when we have black belts come visit, it's not common. If there is a guy that comes in and scores on me, it's going to be the talk of the gyms. They're going to be like, hey, dude, somebody's got to kill this guy. People are going to be calling Eric Hebner, calling Nick Sanders, calling my big brothers. Hey, someone needs to handle this situation. Somebody just scored on Josh, right? It's uncommon. At that time, and what I'm about to tell you is crazy, not in competition, I hadn't been submitted for 1 year or even longer than that. The last time that I could actually remember being submitted in rolling, like in the gym, in a gym, like, and this is traveling and stuff, was a year before, which is obnoxious, right? And I have good training partners. I'm getting good rounds. I was just doing really good. My defensive jiu-jitsu was good too. But 30-something-year-old Englishman, Chris Paines, and I did a 1-hour round, basically, when he visited. And he submitted me. He armbarred me. And I was like, my jiu-jitsu is not conceptual enough. And that is when I threw out the technique book. And it stopped being technique versus concept. And I still do teach in technique sometimes. I am not one of those guys that thinks it needs to be one way or another. But I think as a competitor, it's much more valuable. As an athlete, as a jiu-jitsu athlete, as a practitioner, someone who's trying to perform jiu-jitsu at times, it is so much more valuable to understand what you were trying to accomplish and why you were trying to accomplish it than it is to be able to do what someone else can do. Because if you know how you understand something and how you can accomplish it, it's so much harder to deal with. It really is. Like if I'm grappling a guy that does everything slightly differently because he's only thinking about his jiu-jitsu in goals, and he hasn't watched the same YouTube video that millions of us have watched telling us about the one grip that you have to use, that just changed my jiu-jitsu. And so I know that this episode isn't really about the changes that are, that the show has caused me. It's just kind of telling you guys about it. But those 2 episodes, really great when it comes to conceptual learning. Chris is such a great teacher. He's back with the Villain Cast. I'm assuming I should get a freaking call soon to be on it. I notice I have not been on the Villain Cast since its return. But anyway, let's move on. Is that all I wanted to say about that? Yeah, just that idea of, one, Chris is super good at jiu-jitsu, I promise you. But 2, it totally changed. It shook my jiu-jitsu that he submitted me. It was like, I cannot believe this. This is unbelievable that this dude was able to beat me like that. Because he didn't have physical attributes on me. They were close. We were both decent athletes, but neither of us was physically gifted. He beat me with jiu-jitsu. And we went, and for both of us, this is really why we became best friends. We had 1 submission each in an hour round and probably 20 points each. It was crazy. I really learned so much about jiu-jitsu and about really understanding time loops and stuff in that round. And so as funny as it is, I'm just breaking down a single round to you guys that I didn't even tell you one thing that happened besides the submissions. But let's move on. Episodes 140 and 144. They are both about rolling without strength. This is a concept I talk about constantly on the show. People want to hear about it. They're always asking about it. I really think it's worth listening. 143, sorry. I think that this episode, we're probably a year removed from it, year and a half removed from it. Maybe only a year. I don't know. To me, this episode is going to age really, really well. It's called BJJ is Fake and Pro Wrestling is Real. And it is about how the jiu-jitsu scene, in my opinion, is going to turn into pro wrestling. And that is not a bad thing. That jiu-jitsu entertainment is not a bad thing. Even if you're watching a video that doesn't teach you jiu-jitsu, that's okay. We can learn jiu-jitsu or just enjoy jiu-jitsu by watching a video that's funny about jiu-jitsu or listening to a podcast that maybe the episode doesn't have much to do with learning jiu-jitsu, and it's just fun, and it's old jiu-jitsu stories, and it's something to do with jiu-jitsu. And that is the beauty of content creation growing in the jiu-jitsu space, is that you are going to see so many new ideas and so many new things. But If you want to look back and say, what is going on in the jiu-jitsu space? Episode 143, I explained to you exactly what's going on, and I actually explained to you exactly what is going to happen in the future. And before you joke and think, okay, Josh is being silly, he doesn't know anything, it's jiu-jitsu's not going to turn into pro wrestling, or you don't give that episode the time, the benefit of the doubt. I think it's really important to keep in mind that a lot of you are really excited about a match that I have 2v1 versus my producer Bryce and his older brother Brian, the Allen Bros. Think about think about how pro wrestling that is. From a video, this match idea came from a video that you guys all liked and commented on that was shared by both Allen Bros Jiu-Jitsu and Josh McKinney. And then it turns into a 2v1 match. That has nothing to do with jiu-jitsu learning, but it's funny and it's fun and it's entertaining. Jiu-jitsu is going to be pro wrestling. It already is. It's going to be more. If you want to be in front of the curve as a content creator, if you want to be just in front of the curve, knowing what's going on, knowing the backstage, just like when you used to find out that, just so you guys know, pro wrestling, cover your kids' ears, pro wrestling is actually fake. But anyway, I'm sorry for revealing that to you guys so late in the episode, but it is actually fake. And when you look at it and you deconstruct it, when you were a wrestling fan back then, a lot of times people didn't even realize that wrestling was fake. A lot of people had no idea, right? But it absolutely is. And when you look at that back then, you realize like a lot of this jiu-jitsu stuff, in my opinion, that you see that we all talk about and stuff, I think a lot of it's fake, if I'm being totally honest. I think a lot of it's staged. I think a lot of it, and keep in mind, I did something pretty pro wrestling and had the freaking NWO almost handle a guy that tried to jump me right after the podium after I had beat him in a match. Pretty pro wrestling. But to me, was that guy playing a character? Who knows, right? Who knows? Got me to talk about him. It's kind of a pro wrestling move. Everything's pro wrestling, guys. Episode 145, turn your jiu-jitsu into a video game. If you want to explain skill development, that is the episode for you. Really, you should listen to that one. Always worth mentioning, episodes 148 through 151. I'm going to kind of breeze through these because I'm an hour into this episode. But 48 through 151, doing the Chicago takeover, really loved how that turned out. And those were the first episodes I think that Bryce produced with me. And so, we did 4 episodes in 22 hours. We recorded all 4 Chicago takeover episodes. And in that same 22 hours, tried to sleep. I think we slept 5 hours, 4 hours in between that. But we trained in what people consider two of the hardest training sessions in Chicago. It was the Mark Vives New Breed night class, and then the daytime class or morning class at Seraphin BJJ. And I was telling you guys that I'm pretty good and that I don't lose a lot. I lost a lot. I lost a lot in that week, that Chicago trip that we took. But man, did I gain a lot. Did I learn a lot. So many things that we've talked about in the last 50 episodes have just been deconstructing those 4 conversations with Mark Vives, with Jeff Seraphin, with Chris Wojcik, and with Mahmoud Jabbar. Definitely, you guys would love that episode. Episode 158, a dedicated designated winner episode. Like I said, 49.5, episode 49.5 really does age well because it's all about the need for training method. And then, hey, we've solved it. Here's designated winner. And in the early 200s, I'm going to give you guys some video resources to actually understand deeper of what designated winner is and some breakdowns of a lot of different designated winner games you could play. Again, that's in the early 200s. 164, white belts need to know. 10 things white belts need to know. Really, really great episode for beginners. I've heard complaints that the show is not as beginner friendly anymore. And the truth is, it isn't as much because we do so many deep dives, but I still do always pepper in, hey, white belt, this is how you look at all this kind of stuff we've been talking about, and this is how you look at it. Simpler when you don't understand anything yet. And so I think that episode does a great job of that, though, is 164, 10 things white belts need to know. Episode 181, the ultimate guide for starting Jiu Jitsu, which is also a white belt friendly episode. And then what are the other ones? 172. I was wrong about BJJ's schedule. This is when I started to really understand and deconstruct habits. It's like my second read through of Atomic Habits. I don't know why I didn't understand it the first time, but yeah, it's just a better episode on developing good habits. And those concepts have really helped me over the last 6-8 months too. 175, A Loser's Guide to Never Lose Again. Also great episode. What are the other ones to let you guys know? Just a few more. A last mindset episode. Get your head in the game and not in the guillotine. Great episode title. Come on. Great episode title there. That was a ChatGPT title, if I'm being honest. I always joke that ChatGPT does everything on the podcast. It really doesn't. But every once in a while, it will be really helpful for a title, really helpful for a description. If there's ever a good description, it wasn't me. It was ChatGPT. But I really liked that title that old GPT came up with. 188 is about overcoming plateaus. I know that's still something that people struggle with all the time. 2 interviews to hit if you have not listened. Really the purpose of this episode was to get you to listen to old episodes, right? And so because I'm not going to be posting as much for the next couple weeks because my freaking computer's broke. Sorry to bring that up again. But 2 interviews, if you haven't heard them yet, really, really good. 193, 194. Justin Kitchler, Rob Hanshai, 2 of my newest black belts. Just listen to those episodes. If you want something inspirational, both of them are inspirational. Both of them are funny. They're fun guys. Kitchler's is maybe a little more focused on being funny than any episode we've ever done. A lot of pro wrestling jokes, a lot of offensive stuff. But then I will leave you guys with this. If you have not listened to episodes 196 and 198, remember, we started episode 1 on training method. Episode 49 and a half, we talked about the biggest problem, what I considered 3 years ago, the biggest problem in jiu-jitsu. What was it, Josh? Lack of training method. Episodes 196 and 198. This is my pin in training method. From 200, we're going to start exploring, and we're going to look at some other parts of learning jiu-jitsu. Maybe we'll dive deeper into breath work, maybe mindset, maybe other things. But we're going to stick a pin in training method. And episodes 196 and 198 were that for me. They were my, not mic drop, but my mic set down on training method for at least, I always like to live my life in 6 months to a year terms, at least until my beautiful baby boy is born. Oh, darn it. I told you guys that it was a boy. If you listen to 104 minutes of me ranting, you deserve to know that it's a boy. I can't tell you his name yet, but I'm pretty confident that I know his name. I actually, between me and you guys, right before heading out to Worlds, this is when I'm leaving. I'm leaving today to go to Worlds. I'll compete Saturday and Sunday of this week. But before I left, I've been trying to get this little guy to kick, and he won't do it. And I got down to his tummy, to my wife's tummy last night, and I talked to it, and I said, "Hey, you're being stubborn. I know it runs in the family. But if I could just feel you kick, that would really that would really be cool for me. And he didn't do it. And then not 2 minutes later, my wife says, hey, he's really kicking. And she's felt him quite a few times. I just haven't. You haven't been able to feel him with my hand. And I put my hand on her belly, as I've tried 100 times, 200 times, 300 times at this point. And this dude starts hitting me like a speed bag. Honestly, I'm freaking bawling. I am bawling my eyes out as this dude is punching me. It's such a cool moment. But yeah, beautiful baby boy. Listen to episodes 196 and 198 on training method. As I put my pin in that, what I was going to say is, we'll look at training method again once my son's born. But until then, we're gonna deep dive on some other things, and we're gonna really expand this simplifying jiu-jitsu flag and what it represents and what we do with it, and the ISAJJ Jiu-Jitsu show and all these other things, all these other brands that are synonymous with Josh McKinney. And so that's what we're going to do over the next 200 episodes, or the next, 199 episodes. We will be back next week, again, unedited, raw, unfiltered, with episode 200. And that'll be that. In a few weeks, we'll have a computer again, and we'll be back to cool editing and stuff. But until then, until next week, because there won't be a Tuesday episode. Don't forget, don't be sad. Listen to one of the episodes I just recommended. I just spent an hour and 10 minutes telling you episodes to listen to. There's no way that you've listened to all these. If you've listened to every episode of the ISAJJ Jiu-Jitsu show, send me an email. It's josh@simplifyingjiujitsu.com. If you have listened to every second of ISAJJ Jiu-Jitsu, which I don't know if anybody really has, send me an email. I will send you a free gift, something really cool. And but yeah, if you have, just send it with the title of like, I've listened to every freaking episode of the ISAJJ Jiu-Jitsu show. But yeah, send me that email. That's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope training's going good. Hope we can keep growing this podcast. And most importantly, I hope that today's episode helps you guys suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu. Have a great day, guys.